Hello, UK Crime Book Club. I should have started with that, Antony. We'll tell them all in a minute. Good evening to anyone who is joining us on this lovely Friday night, where it is very, it's already dark and gloomy in Manchester. Don't know what it's like where you are.
Ilkley, dark and grey and gloomy.
So, would you like to introduce yourself, show off the book covers, maybe strike a pose?
Strike a pose, right? Yeah, so I'm wearing the book. Hello, I'm Antony Dunford. I've written 2 novels. This one came out in May, which is the one that's on the T-shirt. There we go, on the same. And this one was January 2021. Got my fingers over the title, Hunted. They're both set in Africa, but different parts of Africa with the same characters. They're set in 2016, the first one, 2018, the second one. So that's me and my books. In
just tagging that was really fast, yeah. Just tagging some members in. I'm sorry, hi Sarah, already joining us. Sarah, I've just seen your tweet on Twitter, so thank you for sharing the details of the interview.
Hi Sarah.
Me. So we'll start with why you had a journalist as your main character in this one.
Interesting. Yes, I wanted in this one, after the first one was much closer, Hunted, the characters are the people in Africa who know the place, have lived there for a while or are born there. I wanted an outsider's perspective to bring us, the readers, because the majority of my readers are UK, US and Australia, strangely, but also Canada, to give them the sense of the outsider. So I picked an Irish chap, for reasons I'll come on to in a moment, as a journalist in Ireland, and then had him sent to the Congo. And he's of the people who've never been there, looking at it with eyes of wonder. And journalist because I've been actually reading Sarah Saltoun's novels about journalism, and also I was on a panel with her and Holly Watt at Crime Fest a couple of years ago, and very conscious of the changing nature of journalism as technology alters it, and the idea that you go out with a camera crew to wherever you are in the world, that seems to be less and less, and now it's done remotely. I wanted to capture these 2 worlds and change in everything, and journalism seemed to be the way to go. And Colm was ready-made, because Colm, I used to work with a chap called Colm Reed years ago. He was a project manager extraordinaire, still is. And on my leaving do from that particular job, we were in the pub, and he said, if you ever need a sort of slightly grumpy Northern Irishman in one of your novels, use me. So I took him up on that. And the real Colm is very different to the Colm that I've created, but I've used his name and his accent and parts of his life, very little bits of it. But yeah, so Grumpy Irishman came from a Grumpy Irishman who wanted to be known as a Grumpy Irishman.
I did love that in the acknowledgements. I thought that was really sweet. So does he actually know now? Has he seen the book?
Oh yeah, I sent him a copy, and he bought one as well. Because in between me saying I was going to write it and it actually getting published, he had 3 kids. He had a son, Connor, who I dedicated the book to, and then twins about 18 months later. So he's got 3 kids under 3. So he bought a second copy of the book, and the one that I sent him that I'd signed, he's locked away so that they can't eat it.
This sounds like a man with experience of small children.
He said he was learning quickly, but he hadn't slept for 18 months.
Yeah, it'd be a while longer before he gets a decent sleep. Wait for the lazy teenager years.
Yes.
It'd be fine. Sarah, Leslie says hello. Hi, Leslie.
Hi, Leslie.
Sarah says, have you been to Africa for research? Which prompts me to read out, I've never been so glad to assume that the author didn't actually go to this place for the research. I think generally we quite like it when authors have been to a place. I am desperately hoping you did not go to this place for research.
Not for Born the Same, though. I'm for Hunted, which is set in Kenya, Malawi, South Africa, Tanzania. We nearly went because I was reluctant to publish a book about a place that I'd never been to, and then COVID hit, and that all got cancelled. But yes, Kenya's a very safe place, and Bandari, the conservancy in Hunted, is based on Ol Pejeta, which is in near Nanyuki, near Mount Kenya, which is a popular tourist destination and has many sort of nice, luxurious places to stay. Whereas the Congo, no, I've not been anywhere near Democratic Republic of the Congo or Garamba National Park or that little bit of Africa. I
should clarify, I have no issue with the beauty of Africa. I'm just glad you've not been in a war zone.
No, it's I've read so much about it and seen documentaries. There's a Catherine Bigelow documentary about the park itself, and then there's the Douglas Adams's Last Chance to See, which is where I first.
Okay, I've not read that. I love Douglas Adams.
It's in 2000. He was interviewed by James Naughtie for James Naughty's book club.
Okay.
And James Naughtie asked him what book he was most proud of writing, and he said Last Chance to See. And at that point, I thought I'd read everything he'd written, and I'd not even heard of it. So I had to go and track it down. But this was Mark Carwadine, who's the biologist, and Douglas went to Madagascar for a one-off radio show to see if they could see the eye, which is a very rare nocturnal lemur with a very long finger. And they did this, and there's a little story about how they spent 2 weeks not finding an eye, and they kept every night, because it's nocturnal, they had to go out into the jungle to try and find the thing, and they didn't. And on the very last night, they're sitting there outside their tent going, it's raining, should we even bother going out, because we've not had a hope. And there was one in the tree above them. The most wonderful coincidence in history. But as a result of that, they pitched the BBC for a series about endangered species. And this is about, they did 6 episodes about 6 different endangered species. And they researched another 2 that weren't actually made. And one of those was the northern white rhino. And they went to Garamba National Park. And at the time, it was relatively peaceful. And there was a woman and her husband, Kes Hillman Smith, who's also written a book, which is very heavy. And they had gone there in the early 80s and started recovering the rhino population, which had been about 15, and they got it up to 30 odd. And that book is about their conservation and the history of the park over 100 years. And then in the early 2000s, 2003, the boars around it exploded again. And 2 years, all the rhinos in the park were killed, and it was it was a no-go area. And when Douglas Adams died in 2002, but this was 1988, 89, they did a 20th anniversary follow-up. Mark Carwadine did, but Stephen Fry went with him rather than Douglas, and they couldn't go to Garamba because it was still too dangerous. So they ended up going to Ol Pejeta in Kenya, which is where my first novel's loosely set.
Do I dare ask yet about, in fact, I wrote it down so that I wouldn't forget. So how much work have you undertaken on the novel that you won't start before Endangered is finished?
That's a dangerous question.
Do you want to explain what my what this relates to? Because this was in the acknowledgements. Well, in your author's note.
Yeah, so this is Endangered. I wrote before I wrote. Hello. Before I wrote Born the Same, and I'd written Born the Same as a sort of teaser to be given away as part of the publisher's sort of Crime Bites thing, and I didn't quite get it right. It was about 20,000 words wrong, and then I parked it, and then I wrote Endangered, complete 90,000 word novel, and then I wrote it again, and then I wrote it again, and then I wrote a 4th version of it, and this is full novel each time, and 3 of them were completely different. I threw away the previous version.
Really? 3 entirely? Wow.
And 2 of them were the same novel, but once in first person and once in third person, just to see what worked. But then I sent the 4th version to Hobeck and Adrian was, this is good, just a couple of tweaks. But I still wasn't happy with it. There was something not quite right. And eventually another Hobeck author, Harry Fisher, volunteered to have a look at it. And he read it and he said, I can see your problem straight away. You've got two stories and I can't tell which is the main one. And one was Jane's and one was McKenna's. So I started trying to fix that and got myself in a horrible mess. And so as a sort of palate cleanser, I just had a quick look at Born the Same. And I wrote most of it in about 6 weeks. And it just flowed. And what I was trying to do with it was just to experiment with the page turning. I wanted to make sure that at the end of every chapter you wanted to keep reading. And it was just an experiment. I wasn't expecting it to end up getting published, but I shared it with a few of my crime gang friends from my UEN days, and Louise Mangos and Bridget Walsh and folk like that. And they were, can't put it down, have a go. So I sent it to Hobeck and they went, let's go, let's do it.
I do love the fact that with the first one, and I read in the acknowledgements or in your author's note again that you played around with different versions from different points of view, and you tried to make it from Jane's point of view, but the way that you've gone back and it was Colum's story is that really shines through. It really is Colum's story. I can't imagine it being told through anybody else's point of view. And I also like it when books maybe have the first book in the series is kind of a standalone in a way because it introduces a different character. The main character's kind of introduced as a secondary character and then they become the star of the series.
Yeah, which is what I've done here. And I'm trying to make sure that they're all standalone. I mean, the Endangered isn't a sort of plot follow-up to Hunted. It's the same characters in a similar situation. And it does involve similar locations, and there are certain scenes that are, if you've read the first one, they have a different meaning than if you haven't. But you don't need to have read any of the books before reading any of the others.
Yeah.
But to get back, sorry, as I say, to get back to your question about what about the book that I'm not touching until I finished Endangered, I failed. And I touched it.
You've touched it. Dare we ask?
Yeah, so this is,
does the lovely back of Hobeck know because I thought I was like, right, I'll ask this question. There's nobody from Hobeck there yet, and I knew they'd come. We knew they'd arrive, so I thought I'll get that question in quick, and it's like you knew. It's like you knew that I was going to ask a question.
I live in Ilkley, which is in West Yorkshire, and it's a bit of a historic spa town that grew in a very structured way because the entire valley was owned by one family, the Middletons. And then there was a little village in it called Ilkley that the Middletons owned part of, but not everything. And then between 1867 and 1894, the Middletons slowly sold off the land and the town grew as it did. So there's 1867, they go, and then 70s, 80s, 90s. And it's well documented, and there's a local historian called Mike Dixon who's published 4 or 6 books. And then there's others, there's books all over from several different people, Denis Silito and Alex Cockshott and so on. And it's just the most fascinating thing. And Ilkley there's folk tales about things on the moor, giants on the moors, and there's spas and hydros and beautiful, strange Victorian buildings and random tales and epic events. And I just wanted to set something in this place in the 19th century. And I came up with, inspired heavily by a book that was co-written by Mike Dixon, local historian, and Greg Raddick, who's professor of the history of science, I think, at Leeds University.
Right.
And Greg is Charles Darwin is his idol, I think. And Charles Darwin came to Ilkley in 1859 and took the waters. And he was here for several weeks. And during that time, he was here on his own to start with. And then after a couple of weeks, his family joined him. But during that time, he was engaged in correspondence with other scientists and with members of the church about Origin of Species, which was published while he was here. So in the scheme of understanding of biology and science and evolution of the entire world, the publication Darwin was here when it was published. And I thought there was something he could do around that. So I'm working on a story that's set in 1869, not 59, that involves many things. And what I was trying to stop doing before I finished Endangered was going anywhere near the research, because research is a rabbit hole, and I failed. And I wanted, it's a crime novel, so there's going to be a crime. So I wanted a policeman. So I've got this wonderful little book called Street Characters of a Victorian City, which is the paintings of an artist called John Snowdon. And he wandered around the streets of Bradford in the 1890s and painted the people he saw. He had a sort of criteria as to who he would accept. And one of those people was a police constable, Thomas Bottomley. And he was very interesting. The little biography of him says that he was on the Manningham beat for 30 years and he never once took a case to court. And that's a bit strange, a policeman who doesn't actually have to give evidence. That turns out to be totally bollocks. And he did take many cases to court. He was assaulted on the beat. His great-granddaughter has written an entire book about Victorian policing in Bradford based on her research into her great-grandfather's life. But I just saw this picture and had to go, I need to know a bit more about policing in the 19th century if I'm going to do this. And then rabbit hole. I've now got about 30 books on Victorian Bradford, Victorian Yorkshire, Bradford policing, mills. I've got Ordnance Survey maps from 1847 to 1906. I've got a wall of stuff. And I've got this story emerging out of it, and I need to stop and focus on Endangered because it's been fun.
At least your rabbit holes are useful, Antony. Mine tend to be absolute rubbish. Absolute rubbish. The petty revenge thread on Reddit is one of my favourites, but I never actually go on to Reddit. There's always a link from some other website somewhere. I'm such a sucker. And I'll just sit and read 40 reasons why, 40 things about, see, this is why I'm not writing a book, isn't it? 40 things about why it's bad to work in the food industry, or why customers are idiots, or, just things that make you chuckle and you think that'll loosen the brain. And then you look up and it's been 40 minutes and you think, this is not good. This is not good at all.
If you get one idea out of that 40 minutes that you can then squirrel in that gives you one sentence that reads better than it would have done otherwise, then you've got an excuse.
You have, however, I make notes based on the ideas that I get and then never look back through the notebooks. So I might do one day. I've got enough of them. I've got enough ideas to last me the rest of my life and beyond.
Yeah.
But it's actually sitting down and doing it. How do you do that? How do you sit down and write a book?
At the moment, I've got I've talked about Endangered and I've talked about Quiet Town, as it's currently titled, but I haven't talked about Burn Down, Manningham, Happiness Falls, and what's the other one? Can't remember. I've got about 5 on the go, and what I've done to try and ease them out is I'm writing a 750-word synopsis, and the opening 2 chapters, 3,000 words thereabouts, and I'm firing them at people, asking for thoughts, and trying to get people to say, right, this is the one that comes across as the most alive, and therefore you've got to go with that one because that's the one that is closest to the top of your head at the time. I'm in that little process. By end of October, I hope to have finalised which one I need to write first, and then we'll go.
So are you aiming for one published book a year?
Yes, 1, 2 if I could do it, but 1 would be ideal. I do have to do Endangered though. That's got to be done. It's just been kicking around too long. The problem is it's now split into 2. That's the other one, Endangered and Extinct. I've actually got 4.
Can practically hear the whip cracking in the background.
But yeah, no, I've had a productive couple of weeks though. I've written quite a lot, and some of it wasn't rubbish, so all right.
Win-win. All of you always think that what you write is rubbish, and it astounds me.
But
some of them.
The first draft usually isn't that great. You've got to, if somebody sends you over a first draft, you go, this is a first draft. I can see it's a first draft. You need to let it gestate. You need to come back to it and then fix all the things that you don't notice because the story is flowing onto the page. So Stephen King on Writing says that he comes up with a character idea, scribbles it all down, spends 3 months writing the thing, prints it out, sticks it in a drawer, literally for 6 months, and then comes back to it and looks at it as if he's never read it before in his life, and that's when it turns into a story.
You need a bit of distance.
Yeah, I think for different people have different processes, and there's a scale between that and planning it completely from the start and then writing it. I vacillate between both extremes. Sometimes I plan, sometimes I just blurt things out on the page. So
I was going to show the copy of On Writing that I normally have behind me, but it's taken me 3 years. I finally tidied the bit of my office that you can see. Let's not pretend it's the whole thing. I've done a good section of it. My desk was quite tidy, but as I look at it now, I could do with going over that again. But what other writing resources would you recommend?
I write everything on a computer, but I take notes still by hand quite a lot, though I have got more into just putting them into notes on the phone rather than having a notebook in my pocket at all times. But that's slowly changed. But that's it. I need quiet. I can have music, but it has to be music without words. It has to be classical or instrumental. But I tend to just have it quiet and then get on with it. And there is the writer's block, which occasionally you're feeling a little bit uninspired. I'm not quite as brutal as Lee Child, who said, writer's block? There's no such thing as writer's block. Have you ever heard of anyone having truck driver's block? It's a job. Get on with it. But when I do struggle, I tend to read things like On Writing or books about the craft of writing, and that will get me into the mood to write as much as other things. Also, I read constantly and something really good, and I'll just be going, I want to be doing this.
I've actually got a writer's block. So it's hundreds of pages. I've obviously not made my way very far through it yet, but you're just supposed to open it in any random place and be inspired. I find the idea of opening it in a random place and not working my way from the front to the back quite horrifying. So I can't do a random thing, but there are some good things in it.
I know exactly what you mean about that. Yes, there's an order to things. You have to follow the order. Some folk do, some folk don't. I'm one of the follow an order sort of thing. Yeah.
We should actually discuss Hobeck.
Oh yes.
One of my bullet points just says Hobeck. So let's talk about how you met and how you came to work with them, because Adrian and Rebecca are just lovely. We obviously had them on a few weeks ago. Just the two of them sitting chatting. It's one of the most fun ways to spend an evening watching them just talk.
Yes, so how they met them. They were starting out, I think, when I was the second author they signed. I was the third one they sent a contract to, but because Lewis Hastings was on the other side of the world, my signed one got back to them before his did. Robert Dawes was the first. But I only found out about them because Judy Dakin, who has done a book of short stories with Hobeck, but publishes principally through Joffy, she'd seen that they were looking for submissions, and she'd already been accepted by Joffy, so she didn't send anything to them at that point, but she sent me the link, and I sent them Hunted, and I think it was only a couple of days later I got an email from Rebecca going, this is the sort of thing we want, can you send me the full thing? And off they went. And then that began a very entertaining 6 months, because I think that was about July 2020, and it was published January 2021, and we picked the publication date reasonably early in that 6 month cycle, and then sent the novel to an editor, a structural editor, who came back with, change this, change that. Okay, no problem. And they were all very sensible and useful things. I set to it, but they took quite a lot of work, and it got very compressed. And we were looking through the emails before Christmas, because at the time, Adrian and Rebecca were just getting started. They didn't realise that you got very limited control over the publication date through Amazon once you've set it.
Yeah.
Apparently you can move it by up to 2 weeks, but that's it. So they picked a date, which was fine. We thought it was fine at the time. It turned out we needed more time. They pushed it back, but only pushed it back 2 weeks. And I think it was the 20th of December. I sent them the copy that was published for a 26th of January publication date, and there's still to go out to the art readers and all that sort of stuff in that period of time. So it's really compressed. And we learnt a lot because there was about 50 typos went out in the first version that have since been fixed, but that wasn't great. Simply because I was changing stuff right up until the day before I sent the whole thing.
Thing is, with any new venture, there are going to be teething problems, and the earlier you can hit them and iron them out, the better.
Yeah.
Hello, Mr. Hollindrake. Let's see. Sarah's asked, do you have an auto by author that you have to buy ASAP to read? Kaz calls them her shut up and take my money authors, the ones that you'll just see the name and just buy it.
Possibly not. I mean, I read as much as I possibly can, and I like to try new things. So if I'm somebody who'll read one of a series and then go, that was really, really good, but I won't go straight to the next one. It's very rare that something that compelling. I have read everything by Lee Child more than once, because I'm kind of obsessed with just how he manages to grip you so much with such simple writing and such simple concepts. He was in Kirby Lonsdale, just over the way up the valley, when he wrote the first one, and his parents moved to Harpenden, where my brother lives, when he was at university, and there's a few sort of little connections that maybe do. But I will buy his next one, but it wouldn't cause me great pain if I didn't. It's more reach. Others, I say another Hobeck author, Mark Whiteman's, just read his new one, Chasing the Dragon.
Haven't read it yet, but I've heard amazing things about it.
Oh, it's super. It's just one of those such immersive. You're just in there in Singapore. Just beautiful, pleasure to read. So if he brings another one out, I'll be all over that. But I read everything. Probably 3 a week, and it's all random stuff. It's what did I read this week? I'm on The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. I read The Miniaturist, Jesse Burton. I'm currently reading Interesting Times by Terry Pratchett, which I've read everything by Terry Pratchett. And again, I met him once. I had breakfast with him, and since then,
wow.
That was 19 whatever year. Linford Christie won the gold medal at the Barcelona Olympics, 1992. I went on
I actually think it is 92. Yeah, I don't know how I know that.
I went on a writer's retreat. I was at university. My mother went, and it was her sort of writing, not mine. And it was mostly Mills and Boon and that sort of thing. And actually, that's not even hers really. But we went because Terry Pratchett was the keynote speaker, and he on the Sunday we met him at breakfast. He was the last one in, and we were the last ones in. And he was a little bit irritated with his agent because he hadn't a clue why he was there. But we just had a lovely chat over breakfast about writing and stuff. And so since then, I've read everything that he's written, and I go back to it because they're so light and so cleverly constructed, particularly his Guards series. I think those are super. Anyone else?
Funnily enough, I was going to say, I think it's Guards that Kaz bought me for Christmas. So I started it and I absolutely love it, and I haven't been able to go back to it yet. And the only reason is because I read so much for interviews that takes priority. So it takes me a long time to get to a book that I've been trying to read. I think the last time it took me 18 months to get to a book. Yeah. So it takes a long time, and it's always worthwhile when I get there, but I do intend to work my way through Terry Pratchett's back catalogue.
I know the problem. My to-be read pile of things I actually bought is about 2,000 books. I've got over 500 on Kindle and about 1,500 in physicals. And I've got Gaslight. Another. This is. Can you see the title, or is that reflecting badly? This is Gaslight.
Kind of make it out.
Let's do that. It's backwards. That's probably better.
Oh, okay, Femi. Yeah.
Femi was on the UEA course I was on, and I read. What was it? Thingy. Can't remember the name of the first one. Which is just Light Seekers. And I love the style of that. And at Harrogate, Femi was on panel there, and I went and I wanted to buy a copy of Gaslight to get him to sign it, because I hadn't actually physically seen him since 2019, because the world gets in the way and he lives in Namibia. And but it wasn't out. It wasn't for sale. So I bought another copy of Lightseekers and got him to sign that. I said, I really wanted to buy a new one, but it's not out till November. And he said, funnily enough, I got a proof copy in my goodie bag for Harrogate. Would you like it? So he gave me his own proof copy and signed that. But I haven't
That's so lovely.
And I really want to be. Just everything is just right. What should we start today? Read. It's the greatest player in the world.
It is. It really is. I'm intrigued to know. Have you got a lot of signed books?
I've got a couple of shelves worth, 3 shelves. Yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I did for a while every Crime Fest, Harrogate, Morecambe and Vice, which was around briefly, and things. I would buy every debut I saw as a sort of supportive thing. So I've got a couple of shelves of things. I've stopped doing that now because I've just got too many of them. I still buy the occasional one, but I don't buy everyone. Crime Fest, we'll have 2 debut panels. There'll be 8 things. First couple of years I'd come away with 8 signed books, including one which I still have somewhere where the lady who signed it, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, said, "This is the first time I've ever signed a book."
Oh, that is so lovely to be the first one.
Yeah,
it's such a special thing. Do you get as excited as I do? Are you?
I don't know how excited you get, but yes, I do.
You have seen me at festivals. I get excited. There is no calming me down. I am like a bouncing puppet, which at my age is probably not that wise. I got distracted by something that sounded like it had flown into the window, but it's fireworks. So,
fireworks on 29th of September. There's something in Manchester you celebrate around this time of year?
You tell me. This is not an irregular occurrence. I should know the sound straight away now, but it sounded like just one thing that echoed against the window. And we have a lot of wildlife in the garden, so I was slightly worried for a minute, but no, we're just kind of used to fireworks. We just disregard them by any point. By this point, I want to ask you about one of Colum's traits. He likes to try and fix things. He's not necessarily very good at it, but he likes to have a go. Does that come from a person? Because I know a few people who are like that, who will just go at anything with a screwdriver, regardless of how it turns out. So it made me smile because it was such a nice little touch.
I can't remember where it came from specifically, but yes, it's that sort of just someone will have a tinker, and how does he phrase it? Something along the lines of, "I'll have a go until I've thoroughly broken it, and then I'll look at the manual," something like that.
I'll look at the manual, or I'll call I'll call and ask someone for help. Something like that. It was it just really made me smile because you've made him very endearing. Everything about him's just really lovely. I know he's based on the Grumpy Irishman, but doesn't necessarily come across as grumpy, does he? He's just very sweet.
No, he's sort of it's not quite. He's not genuinely grumpy. Just a little bit vaguely irritable, I guess. Yeah, it's not a major flaw.
An Irishman in the middle of a very hot place where potentially you're going to be shot and there's gunfire in the distance, you could be a bit irritable. That's okay. I think that's perfectly reasonable behaviour.
Yes. And there were other things like the lack of ability to charge stuff that I tinkered with, having him have a problem with it and just being so used to his phone. But I thought, no, that's going to be too it'd be too repetitive and irritating. So I transferred that to Fatu, and only had to play that down a little bit. But yeah, it's just different things to make it real that there's a different place, but without distracting from the fact that I really wanted people to be turning the page. Put too much detail in it, slow it down, so it must be a bit quick.
Yeah, it was very quick. It did not distract me from turning the page. It just added warmth and depth to the characters. So job done. That's what you set out to achieve. That's what you achieved. One of the other things I wrote down about Colin was he keeps getting what he wished for. It's almost enough to make me not want to wish for anything again. So he's hoping for this story. He's a journalist. He wants to go out and do something, and then he gets sent to a war zone in Africa. He's being a glorified messenger boy at one point, he feels, but he's when they're out and he has to pass a message from one person to another, while they're kind of worried about more hunters being around. And he's feeling like a glorified messenger boy, but at the same time, he's really excited for the danger. And the second he gets excited for the danger, you kind of go, oh, Colin, what are you doing? What is going to happen to you now?
Yes, that was called part of the sort of boiling the frog idea. I mean, I really wanted to start with something that was so mundane and so dull, but that captured you enough to keep you going and slowly turn it so it's faster and faster and faster and faster and faster, and with these little tipping points, like the one you just mentioned, where it suddenly goes from there's a threat but it's not real to actually it is a bit real. And then it starts to get realer and realer and realer, and yeah, every time I'm thinking, oh, we should have a breather here. Nah, let's just keep going.
I think it's also interesting to read because you kind of go into the story and they're just watching the situation around them. They don't feel like they're kind of part of it. And then how things change as they realise that they're part of it. They're not bystanders anymore. They're not just observing what's happening. They're actually part of it. And it is the boy and the frog. You are slowly giving them more and more responsibility, more and more things that they need to do. And it's really interesting watching the character development through that.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, I tried. I was worried that in terms of journalistic distance from the thing that they're reporting on, to get the balance right between them not trying not to get involved because they're there to report, not to come, versus the situation being such that they had no choice. And I was worried that the story might be too unrealistic from a journalist perspective, which isn't necessarily a problem for most readers, but it might be for journalists. So I did Sarah Saltoun, who provided a wonderful endorsement that's on the cover. It's just here.
My eyes are not that good. You might have to lean forward a little bit.
Yeah, I can.
Modern day Heart of Darkness. My eyes are better than I thought.
But I just ran it by Sarah and said, "Just is this realistic?" And she very kindly said, "Yeah, this is fine." Particularly Eileen O'Connor, apparently, a very realistic character. She said, so that was very nice.
I know we talked about how I'm really glad that you wrote this one through Colum's point of view, and obviously the second one is Jane's. Was it a nice thing in the end once you settled on actually this is the point of view? Was it nice to have two different main characters as such to work with?
It's very different. I mean, this one's column for about 70% and Fatu for the other 30% in the second half.
Love Fatu.
Hunted is Jane for, she's the majority, just over, but there's another couple of characters' point of view you get. One is about 30% and then one's quite small. And point of view is always, it's what you're showing the reader. Because I wrote Endangered, the first version of that was first person, Dennis McKenna, 100%, which was really quite constraining because you could only see what he saw. And given he was he's not one of the action heroes, it was I had to twist the story in ways that I wasn't particularly happy with, just so that he could see what was happening. Or I had major action scenes taking place off scene and then reported back through dialogue, which was also very unsatisfying. So there's a balance of what do you show and what do you hide, which towards the end of the book I play with again, because there are certain bits that you only get reported later on rather than actually seeing them. And I did write them as if you were there, but I thought it just changed it a little bit. And that's, yeah, well, if you haven't read it, see if it works.
Some of the research for this must have been based on the scenes that I cried at when I was reading this. One of them, I don't really want to kind of give anything away, and I don't think it would, but some of the scenes are quite intense, shall we say. And especially the ones, you know, when you start questioning, you think, how am I going to word this? I was very moved, and it's the detail that you used in these scenes, and it really just kind of focused on the heartbreak in front of them. I can feel, look, you see my eyes going thinking about it. It was so beautifully done, and you conveyed the horror in a kind of, it's a horror, but it's matter of fact. I don't know how you balanced that, but you did, because obviously with the different people, you've got the Rangers seeing things through, and it's kind of, they've become accustomed to this is what's happening. They don't want it to happen, but they're kind of more methodical about it. And then you've got, am I making my point without kind of destroying a scene?
Where that sort of thing has come from is from reading things about that sort of thing, and then working out how to do it. So one of the books that I read before writing this is The Last Rhinos by Lawrence Antony. He was a South African conservationist who he wrote a more famous book called The Elephant Whisperer, where he had his own conservancy in South Africa, and he rescued a herd of elephants that had been they weren't in a good state, and he nursed them back to health on his land. And the last rhinos, he heard about the last rhinos in Garamba National Park in the 2000s, and he tried to go and take them out and bring them to his conservancy, and he ultimately failed. And there's hints of inspiration from that. But part of this, he already had a rhino on his conservancy in South Africa. And there is a photograph in this book of, her name was Heidi, of her the day she was poached. A helicopter came into the conservancy, they shot the rhino and cut her horn off, and they actually got a photo of the body in there. And this is a rhino that you've been told about how they fed it. You've got to know this thing by the point that comes up in there. And that was the first time when I saw that, I was like,
yeah.
And it's horrible. It's real, and it's really hard to just imagine that it happens at all. I mean, simple stuff like the sycamore tree getting cut down in Hadrian's.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, from the majority of folks' perspective, it's senseless, brutal, meaningless nonsense. But it was there, and you have to treat it with such a with a respect and an acknowledgement of what it is, but also what it means. So I had a go, and I'm pleased that it worked, because it was.
Well, it's beautiful. It gave me baggy eyes from crying. So it's beautifully done, and I think it's something that was necessary. I know it's not going to be an easy read, but it shouldn't be an easy read. It should be difficult to read. You should need to take a pause for a minute as you're kind of looking over that scene.
Yes, I mean, it is difficult for the books, because there's a not dissimilar scene in Hunted, but you can't ignore it. I mean, the majority of it is hopefully a page-turning action adventure through some beautiful, fascinating places.
Yeah.
With good guys and bad guys and all that sort of stuff, and things that make hopefully a satisfying read. But yes, there are certain points, beats, emotional heartbeats that help drive the story and turn the action. So this is where it goes from theoretical to real, and then everything starts to speed up a little bit.
One of the other things that you've done just amazingly well is you've stuck a load of characters together who don't really belong, and all of their different personalities and how they tease each other. And there's a particular scene where somebody's guiding Fatu and Colm to a hut for the night, and the light in front of him is shaking, and it's because he's laughing so hard because they're calling it this luxury hut, and he knows what's on the other side of this door. And it really made me giggle, how the interactions between everybody, because they don't know each other, so they're never quite sure, was that a serious comment, was that not a serious comment? And then there'll be a glint in somebody's eye somewhere, something will give it away that actually they were joking. And it's really nice to see that bond kind of they're really unsure around each other because they don't know what to expect, and there's gunfire in the distance, and you know they're there for a really sad reason. But actually, these relationships the bonds form under this pressure, and how that's done is very clever.
Thank you. It is. It's yeah. You get banter and camaraderie in difficult situations, and certainly the couple of documentaries I watched about the Rangers of Garamba, that came through. So if I've managed to recreate it on the page, then super.
Yeah, absolutely have.
Because there's
Malcolm said he watched a post of the Yorkshireman who played piano to blind elephants. Just fascinating, simple but beautiful.
Yeah.
You know what? You know which rabbit hole I'm going down next, right? I'm going to go looking for that video. That's what I'm going to go and do after our interview. Somebody has said I love that idea, Rebecca. Beck Collins. So I'm not sure which idea now because we've talked about so many things.
It could be just the blind elephants having the piano played.
Could well be. Yeah, the bonding I absolutely loved, and then you've got kind of the newspaper office before Colin leaves as well, and then obviously he must come back such a changed man. So much changes just in this kind of, is it 3 weeks?
Yeah.
3-week period, and profoundly life-changing from somebody who wasn't expecting this, and then he's suddenly on a plane and he's in Africa and he's never dry, which he's probably used to. It's like sending a Mancunian, we're never dry.
Yes, quite, yes. I think he actually makes that joke when he meets Kennett for the first time on the Dungu runway. So.
Have I just stolen Column's joke as my own? I do apologise. So when you are working through, obviously you've got the third one, Endangered, so you're kind of working through that. Do you envision more books in this series? Or are you going to... Is there a finite number for you, or are you going to see where it goes?
I've certainly got the plots for 6 in total. So if 2 are done, Endangered would follow, and then Extinct would be the next in that 3 line. And then...
Sorry, did you say that Endangered and Extinct are kind of 2 halves of one?
The current Endangered is being torn into 2.
Right, okay.
But they will be chronologically separate, and I'll just change it so it got a bit intertwined.
Right, okay.
But there's a couple of other ideas that I've had, so that would make 6. But those are somewhere back there in the list of novels that I'm currently knocking out. So hopefully we'll get to those.
Any of the ones that you threw away or kind of put to one side years ago that you said luckily nobody ever saw them, is there really nothing to work with in any of those? Would you go back to them?
There are certainly scenes that I would like to lift out, but it's only if they'll work in whatever they land in. I went to see Amit Dand, writes as A.A. Dand, in Bradford 4 years ago. And that was when he's just had his second Harry Verdi novel published and is working on his third. And his editor, Darcy, was there as well. And he said, I wrote this brilliant scene for the first novel, and I sent the novel 90,000 words over to Darcy, and she sent me it back with 20,000 of them missing, saying, you need to be 90,000 words long, but those 20,000 were the wrong ones. It was quite brutal. And she took this scene.
It's quite brutal.
And he said, right, but I really like that scene, so I kept it and I put it into the second novel, and it sent it off to her, and it came back and then gone again. And so I was trying to put it in the third one. I didn't even bother because it's a great scene, but it just disrupts the pace of the book. So I'm very conscious that you can't just go, I've got a great scene involving salt mining elephants, for example. I'll find a way to squeeze this in, but if it ends up disrupting the plot and the pace, then you can't do it. Though I do have a great scene involving salt mining elephants, and I would like to use it if I can. But
Sarah's saying that she's seen an author that says they keep the work that doesn't go into the whip. So I think a lot of people say they just kind of will cut and paste it into another document or print it out
Yes.
or make a note in a notebook, and that nothing ever gets wasted. But then it does beg the question after your conversation with Amit Dand, can you just hold on to one scene for so long until it eventually makes it into somewhere? Can it become a fun challenge, or is it just kill your darlings and get them gone?
It's a bit of both. I mean, I keep everything. So Hunted is 86,000 words long, and I think it's version 5 is the one that was published, and Hunted version 1 was not the first version of the story. Before that, it was called The Slow Knife, and there were several versions of that. And before that, it was called something else. So I've probably got 500,000 words of what the part of that 86,000 that was ultimately published. I've still got all of that stuff, but whether or not I'd use it is a different thing. Whereas, you can take a scene and it's if the setting is right, that's easy to reuse. And part of the problems with Endangered is I've got a whole bunch of stuff that I've written around Elgon, which is in eastern Kenya, and there's an old mine in a mountain that literally has salt mines that were dug by elephants. But I've not set my story anywhere near it, so it's a bit out on a limb. So either I'll have to come up with a way to go to eastern Kenya on the train or something, or that'll just have to stay there, or possibly just be a short story or the Moai wandering around. That. So I've kept that, but and then Endangered, the same thing. I've got all the versions of that. There are whole scenes, trips across the Chalby Desert, and all sorts of stuff that if I can work them into something, I will. But if not, the story's got to be right. I'm quite happy to brutally cut stuff, but hang on to it, and if there is a chance to rework it, reuse it, then I do so.
Yeah, Malcolm's agreeing. He said it's easy to keep and is a guide to future writing. Yeah, absolutely. We have got 4 minutes left. Providing you know where it is stored, is this a dig at me because I can never find anything? I'm getting good at it. I've been tidying. I've been putting things in folders. You'd be very impressed. I'm very impressed. Long may it last. One of my favourite questions to ask, and I haven't asked anybody this for a while, what have been your most memorable moments as an author so far?
Oh, it's going to take me 3 minutes to come up with an answer to that, so it's going to have to be short. Getting published, getting the letter from Adrian and Rebecca saying, "Oh, we want to publish or not," that was fantastic. I remember being quite squeaky at the time. And when Hunted was longlisted for the debut Dagger, the John Creasy, sorry, not the debut Dagger, it missed the debut Dagger, but D at CWA did send me a little note after it wasn't longlisted for the debut Dagger to say, "Oh, it was so close," and that was before I reworked it, so that was a sort of nice kick. But longlisted for the John Creasy, that was pretty cool. And actually, Born the Same, the general reception of it has been fabulous. The comments, the reviews, not just that people have really enjoyed it, they've enjoyed it because what I set out to write, I seem to have managed to write. Which all the things that you've been saying, it's wonderful to hear because that's what I was trying to write. And
that's always a relief.
It's people are liking it for the reasons that I wanted people to like it, which is fab. It just helps me go, right, I can do this. Let's keep going.
Yeah, definitely keep going. There'll be more than just Hoback cracking the whip if you decide to put your pen down. That's not allowed. We're not agreeing with that. You've got too many people to get the next book in the series out to. Do you want to show off your lovely t-shirt again? We said we'd strike a pose. I can't Vogue. I don't know why I'm trying. My kids ever get hold of that snippet of me doing that, I'll never hear the end of it. And do you want to show the books off and just give us a recap of what people are going to go and buy if they are foolish enough to have missed them so far?
So if you do fancy them, Born the Same is the second one published, but it's the first one chronologically, which is set in Democratic Republic of the Congo in 2016, a tiny corner of Garamba National Park. And Hunted, which is set 2 years later, but was published first is set in Kenya, Tanzania, Malawi, and South Africa in 2018, and they both involve rhinos and elephants. It's just the covers, one has one and one has the other, both done by Jane Mapp, who's fabulous.
And having devoured Born the Same, I will be moving on to Hunted as soon as humanly possible.
Excellent.
I'm really looking forward to reading it. Thank you to everyone who's joined us tonight. We've had some lovely questions and comments, which is really lovely. And thank you so much that I finally got you in front of the camera with me.
Thank you, Sam.
So I'd be delighted to have you back another time to talk about the next books in the series.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Hello. Have a great weekend, everyone.